Good evening and welcome to the New School. My name is Karen Cooney. I'm the director of the BRILLIANCE Centre for Art and Politics. And I think for close to 12 years, we've collaborated with the Public Art Fund in bringing to New York and to the New School in particular, some of the most pertinent and interesting artistic voices from throughout the world. And I'm really delighted to be able to be here today with Ivan and Heather Morison, whose talk is part of the Parsons Fine Arts Visiting Artists Lecture Series. And at times we've collaborated with Public Art Fund and Parsons in not only bringing artists to the New School, but to actually make it part of the lecture series at Parsons. Today, in addition to this talk being co-sponsored by Parsons, Heather and Ivan were also visiting quite a few artist studios at Parsons and offering their critiques. So a deepening and ongoing collaboration with the Public Art Fund that I'm very grateful for. And grateful to Nicholas Baum, the Executive Director of the Public Art Fund, and grateful to Emma Enderby, who is the Associate Curator of the Public Art Fund, and will now introduce the speakers. So thank you all very much for coming. Thank you.
So thank you, Karen. So I'm Emma Enderby, Associate Curator at Public Art Fund. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Heather and Ivan, for being the second speakers in the Public Art Fund's fall season of talks at the New School, organised in collaboration with the Vera Bliss Centre for Art and Politics. The final talk in our season will be on November 16th with the New York-based artist Spencer Finch. And he will not only be discussing his very diverse practice, but also his current Public Art Fund project at Metrotech titled Lost Man Creek. But to this evening. Often working in and with the public realm, Heather and Ivan intertwine art, architecture, and theatre in their dynamic collaborative practice to create moments of surprise, disruption, and hope. With a diverse approach to making, their works have ranged from the creation of large-scale dynamic public spaces to the organization of a nomadic theatre company, in each instance engaging with the ideas of collective experiences and the limitations and the possibilities for creating a work of art. I first came to know their work when they represented Wales in the 52nd Venice Biennale in 2007. And then in 2009, I saw their enigmatic temporary pavilion titled Black Cloud in my hometown of Bristol in the UK, a project commissioned by the public arts organisation Situations. Since then, they have shown and been commissioned to create projects with numerous institutions, including the Hepworth Wakefield and Eastside Projects in Birmingham, Tate Modern in London, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Sydney, Whitechapel Gallery in London, the National Theatre of Wales, the Vancouver Art Gallery, and they were most recently included in London's Royal Academy Group Show, which was on the idea and the topics of artist duos. In fact, the last few days, while Heather and Ivan have been in New York, the idea of duos has come up quite a bit in terms of their practice. And that's actually the reason why I'm going to stop my introduction here, because you're going to get another introduction from Ivan tonight. Heather and Ivan decided 10 years ago that they would no longer do talks together because they speak about their work in such radically different ways. So tonight's format will be Ivan introducing Heather, who will then discuss their practice and projects. But if you're interested, like I am, in their varying opinions, do come armed with questions, as they will both be taking the Q&A. But for now, please join me in welcoming Ivan to the stage.
Will you please be quiet, please? My name's Ivan Morison. I've been given just two jobs tonight. One is to introduce the talk we're about to hear, and the second is to think of a title for it. I love a title, bringing together of a word or a phrase, and the connections they might have with a separate group of ideas, forms, objects, or words to create, to reframe, and to give new direction and meaning to both. Will you please be quiet, please? Was my first attempt at a title, a wonderfully passive-aggressive command to pay attention. In its original context, Raymond Carver's minimalist short fiction, it's a plea as much as a command from a seriously confused husband who has locked himself in the bathroom to his wife on the other side of the door to leave him alone. We've used the title before. This year, at the Royal Academy in London, where we were asked to make a new work for a show that was framed by the curatorial framework of artist duos. The work itself was a minimalist piece of origami, a concertina tube made huge and white and floating, coming down from the ceiling, enigmatic, imposing, but also somehow flaccid, ridiculous almost, demanding attention, but almost too polite to hold it. I often describe our creative process as an artist duo as being a very hidden and private one in which there is a metaphorical dark and silent room to which we retreat and to which only we have access, within which we have absolute freedom, total trust. However, that image of two people, either side of a locked door, one banging to come in, the other pleading for quiet, is also an image I secretly hold of what a creative relationship can be like. I say that not in a bad way, but politeness and harmony are not creative. Agitation, difference, and disagreement are. Like butter on bacon. This brings me to my next try at a title. Like butter on bacon is a Norwegian expression. I first came across it when working with a landscape team in Oslo. We had designed a huge subterranean work, a vast underground cavern, accessible from various tunnels, open to the sky via a long spiraling chimney, and flooded twice a day by a tide, leaving a still tidal pool at its center. I was excitedly building on this idea, adding more and more bells and whistles to the idea, when the lead landscaper very politely interrupted me to say that this was perhaps like butter on bacon. That's good, right? I said. Butter is good, he said. Bacon is also good. But here in Norway, butter and bacon is too much. If Heather and I were to have a tagline, I think that would be it, like butter on bacon. All good, but altogether, perhaps a little rich for some palates. Two cannibals eating a clown. One turns to the other and says, "Does this taste funny to you?" It's my favorite joke by British magician and comedian Tommy Cooper. He was a huge clown of a man in a red fez. I think two cannibals eating a clown surely must be a great metaphor for something. Perhaps Heather and I are the cannibals, and the clown is the funny but disturbing thing that is our art. Or the clown represents the thing that each of us, all of us maybe, are prepared to sacrifice to reach our ends. However, I have a feeling that really Heather and I are in fact the clown, sandwiched between the institutions of art, the critic, the curator, the gallery, the art historian, the collector, the professor, and the cannibal that is the audience. Tommy Cooper died live on national television. I remember seeing it. I was 10. He was in the middle of a magic trick, and as his glamorous assistant turned away from him for a moment, he falls onto his haunches, almost squatting, Buddha-like, shrouded in a sequin cape. The audience laugh as he makes a series of strange hiccuping noises. They continue laughing as he slowly keels over backwards into the red velvet curtain. They laugh harder as a hand reaches out from behind the curtain to seemingly reposition his fez. And they applaud as his body is slowly dragged out of sight under the velvet curtain, and the station goes to an impromptu commercial break. It's too sad, too melancholic, too violent to be a title. Went to a seafood disco the other day, pulled a muscle. Light sleepers wake. So I thought, in fact, a title that might reflect not our working relationship, but our working practice, our philosophy of sorts, might be more suitable for an introductory talk like this. Last year we produced a work called The Cleaving in Toronto. Heather may talk about it. A large jumble of material blocking a city's main thoroughfare, a barrier or barricade one had to negotiate, a checkpoint, a passing through of which was an agreement of terms and conditions. That work, the Cleaving, sat within a curatorial framework that used the Beaufort scale. It's a numbered scale that measures the increasing intensity of wind through visibly identifiable signs, first developed for sailors, making use of things visible at sea, the movement of flags, the sound of clanging of lanyards on masts, the appearance of waves. It was later rewritten to incorporate land-based characteristics, the rising of smoke, the rustle of trees, allowing storm intensity to be judged on a scale of 1 to 12. Our work is also about disturbance. And recently we have thought about this also set against a scale of intensity, a sort of Beaufort scale of art intensity. There is a great, great Scottish poet who has rewritten the Beaufort scale into a poem called Scale of Intensity. Sometimes when thinking about making work or works we have made, or our aspirations towards change, we gauge our work against this scale. I'm going to read John Patterson's poem now. 1. Not felt. Smoke still rises vertically. In sensitive individuals, déjà vu, mild amnesia. See like a mirror. 2. Detected by persons at rest or favourably placed, i.e. in upper floors, hammocks, cathedrals, etc. Leaves rustle. 3. Light sleepers wake. Glasses chink. Hairpins, paper clips display slight magnetic properties. Irritability. Vibration like passing of light trucks. 4. Small bells ring. Small increase in surface tension and viscosity of certain liquids. Domestic violence. Furniture overturned. 5. Heavy sleepers wake. Pendulum clocks stop. Public demonstrations. Large flags fly. Vibration like passing of light trucks. 6. Large bells ring. Book burning. Aurora visible in daylight hours. Unprovoked assaults on strangers. Glassware broken. Loose tiles fly from roof. 7. Weak chimneys broken off at roofline. Waves on small ponds. Water turbid with mud. Unprovoked assaults on neighbours. Large static charges built up on windows, mirrors, television screens. 8. Perceptible increase in weight of stationary objects. Books, cups, pens, heavy to lift. Fall of stucco and some masonry. Sand craters, cracks in wet ground. 9. Small trees uprooted. Bathwater drains in reverse vortex. Wholesale slaughter. Conspicuous cracks in ground. Damage to reservoirs and underground pipelines. 10. Large trees uprooted. Measurable tide in puddles, teacups, etc. Irreparable damage to foundations. Rails bend. Sand shifts horizontally on beaches. 11. Standing impossible. Widespread self-mutilation. Corpuscent visible on pylons, lampposts, metal railings. Waves seen on ground surface. Most bridges destroyed. 11. Damage total. Movement of our hand perceptible. Large rock masses displaced. See white. We're here with the very kind invitation of the Public Art Fund to do what we're often asked to do, to poke around, to take a look, to find the blind spots, look for those moments of opportunity, think about what's been missed and what is needed, to think if there might be something we could offer a place such as this, to work with them towards a possible future project. To Nicholas and Emma and the rest of the Public Art Fund, we'd like to thank you for bringing us over. We would also especially like to extend our thanks to Parsons and to the Viralist Centre for inviting us and hosting us here today and tonight. To both, we are honoured. Your joint conception of the city as a campus, studio, and commons inspires and guides our thinking towards what is not only possible, but necessary. Do I dare is a line from the appropriately American-British poet T.S. Eliot in his modernist masterpiece, Proof Rock, And if you permit me, I'll finish with a very small excerpt that I think captures the feeling of opportunity and uncertainty that comes in moments such as this, when all possible paths are open, only requiring the courage to take one. There will be time to prepare a face to meet the faces that you meet. There will be time to murder and create. There will be time for all the works and days of hands that lift and drop a question on your plate. Time for you and time for me, and time for 100 indecisions and 100 visions and revisions before the taking of a toast and tea. In the room, the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. And indeed, there will be time to wonder, do I dare? And do I dare? Time to turn back and descend the stair with a bald spot in the middle of my hair. So, I have the very great pleasure to be able to introduce the artist Heather Peake, who tonight will be giving a talk entitled, Do I Dare?
Hello, everyone. That was quite good, wasn't it? I didn't know what I was going to say. It's very nice. Okay. There we go. Is that better? Yeah. Okay. I thought I'd start by just giving some kind of context as to quite where we're at the moment. And I mean where Ivan and I, what we're thinking about, and what the studio is working on. And just to kind of give you a feeling of where we're coming from and then where our minds are. The studio at the moment is thinking about lots of different things. One of the things that's quite relevant at the moment, which I think is relevant to you as well, is that we just had, in the UK, we just had a referendum. And you're about to make a big decision too, aren't you? So I can't really properly convey to you what it was like waking up at 3:30 in the morning to find out that we had voted to leave the EU. It was quite extraordinary. And I must say that has actually really entered into the work and the mind of the studio at the moment. I might talk about it a bit later, but it's certainly there. It was very interesting having like an incredible emotional, visceral response, which is what I ended up having to it. I haven't got that now, but that was certainly how we felt the first few days. So what is the studio thinking about at the moment? So we're thinking about civic life a lot. We're thinking about the role of civic life with business, with local government. We're thinking about what we can do about that. We're thinking about civic projects quite a lot. We're also thinking about, talking of civic projects, we're thinking about libraries quite a lot in the studio. We're working on several library projects at the moment. We're closing a lot of libraries in the UK, lots and lots. And probably that's happening here too. We're thinking about, and we're doing a project at the moment where we're opening a library. We've been thinking a lot about grottos and follies and Georgian eye catchers. We've been thinking about glass houses and winter gardens. We've been thinking about gambling quite a bit, and card playing and game playing. And we've been thinking about herbs and growing herbs to make our own tea. We've also been thinking about growing herbs to dye clothes, woad in particular. I've been thinking a lot about magenta as a kind of colour that the Elizabethans used to use. They used to grow, make magenta dyes. We've also been turning a lot of wood. We've got a huge lathe in the studio now, and we've been splitting a lot of wood. We've been chopping a lot of trees down. We have an arboretum in Wales, and we've been felling and making wood, making pieces from that. The last few books I read were Chrysalids by John Wyndham. He was a Birmingham-based sci-fi author. And then I've been reading quite a lot of Ursula Le Guin. But to be honest, the thing that I've been reading in bed the last few weeks, because we've been quite busy, is the biography of Burt Reynolds, and it's really good. We've been folding a lot of paper, and we've also been making some kites, making fires. We've been mucking about with puppets. As Ivan mentioned, we have a puppet theatre. So we're constantly playing around with puppets. I like puppets. They can be really nasty and rude and funny and say things that you don't want to say, or you do want to say, but you get the puppet to say it for you. We've also been inventing work for children, and I mean proper work for children. I mean kind of work that adults are not allowed to have anything to do with. And we've also been designing some playgrounds as well. So I think that's kind of it. I tried to think about the studio and what's in it and where we're at. So that's kind of what we're thinking about at the moment. Ivan and I have been working together, I think, for about 15 years. And we've been doing talks. We started doing talks where you kind of organize your work chronologically, and you say, I did this project, then I did that project, and then this project led to that project. And this year we decided to stop doing that, and actually we had a really good look at kind of how our work sits together. And that everything is connected. So there's all these big projects, and then there's these smaller works, and then there's these things, and there's materials, and these shapes, and these forms. And so we had this incredible kind of months of trying to put the work together in a different way. And this is actually the first time that we're going to present the work in that way. So what I'm going to show you now is lots and lots of images, some things from the studio, some images that you may have seen before because they're documented works, and then things that we're working on at the same time, but they feel like they connect. And I won't talk about every image that I see, actually. I hope that you can look at them and see the kind of connections between them. Maybe you can let me know afterwards if it works or not. So we've got a series of statements, actually, that we like a lot. The first one there was, I'll go back. We are artists. Seems like an obvious thing to say, but it's not really, actually. And I was thinking quite carefully about the fact that perhaps a lot of you here are students as well, and will be are artists or are becoming artists, that simply stating and feeling and knowing that you are the artist, like we are the artists and we make the art, and I try to really embody that, and I'm responsible for the art, that's what I do, and I think it's quite kind of important to feel and embody your place. This project here on the left-hand side, the round circular project, that's a project that is called Sleep is Awake. And it's a work there, you can see it, it's just in Sittingbourne there, which is an area just along the Thames, just outside London, and the work has also been presented in Sydney as well. It's a work that, it's a sort of elliptical balloon that on this image, it's actually anchored to a boat, and it travels down the Thames. The piece, when we present the piece, it's presented in a way that it's not announced. And so just as night falls, that piece gently lights up, and it's filled with helium, and then it rises up into the sky. And it kind of calls people to an area. The first kind of place that Sleep is Awake was in was it was in a kind of it was kind of like a wetlands, but actually the area was really kind of polluted underfoot and very difficult to work in. So it was actually commissioned in a place where you couldn't really disturb the earth. And this piece, Sleep is Awake, would rise up into the sky, and it would glow, and it would draw people to an area that they would never normally come to. And the light, it's kind of bathed this area in this beautiful light and made it look quite special. There's the work there, just being set up in Sydney too. And then we have a picture at the end, and there it is at the end. There is it. That's it in a kind of cradle, and then it lifts up into the sky. Ivan and I work kind of all over the place and internationally, and we pick up lots and lots of different kinds of stories. And I just want to move back to this piece here. I like these two images. This image on this side is actually it's an image that was taken in Tasmania, and it's a whole lot of wood from King Billy pine. When we went to Tasmania, we were invited to go and do a research visit for a piece of work, and we ended up travelling all over the island. Tasmania is a smallish island off the coast of Australia. Tasmania is known for a few things. One is logging, and the other one is copper mining, and the third thing is hydroelectricity. So they're very interesting things to go and visit, and they make a huge kind of impact on the environment. At the time, there was we went to see one of the big hydroelectric dams there, and they have this amazing pipeline that runs all the way across Tasmania, which was where the water was being forced through with the hydroelectric dam. And this pipe was made out of this King Billy pine. We met the guy that walked the pipe that went across, and he just walked the pipe, and he had a kind of hammer and nails and some leather with him, and he was fixing the holes that were in the pipe. And if the water came out of the pipe, you could take your hand off, it was so strong. Anyway, they were replacing the pipe, and they had piles and piles of this King Billy pine, and this wood was actually is extinct now because the Tasmanians used it all up. And so there was this really valuable, huge pile of this wood made out of this pipe, which of course, caused some tension in the community as to quite what should happen to it. It's imbued with such meaning, and because it was extinct, but it was also destructive, and it held all these wonderful. And if you can see, it has these lines across it where the metal was going through. And so, I'm talking about this because the materials that we use are incredibly important to us, and materials really have a way of holding a story or pulling in meaning to them. And so we ended up using some of this wood in a project we were doing in Tasmania. It was actually used for our puppet theatre, which is called Mr. Clever, and was lined one of the caravans. It looked really, really exquisite and beautiful. But it kind of opened up the community to the idea of using the wood for something in their community. And in the end, they ended up cladding the council buildings in this wood. I like this last picture here of Sleep As Awake with these people next to it. It looks sort of beautiful, kind of nestling in all of the reeds as it sits there. So artists know the way to solve a problem is to begin. We've talked about this quite a bit with some of the students this afternoon. You know how that one of the things that Ivan and I do, and artists do in general, is I don't think about where my final form is or where I'm going to until I get there. When I think about and experiment with a material or a form or a shape, we just start and we make something, then we make something else, we leave it, we come back to it, it doesn't look right, we add something else to it, you keep moving onwards. I have quite a few conversations with people that I'm working with where they often want to say, what are you going to make? What's it going to look like? We need to know now, before I've had the chance to go through the process. I think that's got something to do with people's attitude towards risk sometimes. And quite often I'm often working with arts organisations, but sometimes we work on commissions that are with non-arts organisations. And most people nowadays are terribly risk averse. So they want to know 18 months, 2 years in advance exactly what something's going to look like. And I like to just to begin. And artists are incredibly good at doing that. And they make lots and lots of mistakes. And they make lots of cock-ups, and they try again, and they work with different materials and different shapes. And sometimes you don't really know until you get there what something's going to look like. You sort of agitate things. I like this picture. It's a bit like Ivan and I sometimes. This one on the left. Which one am I? So we've got some images here. This image on the far side is an image of a close-up of a piece called Skirt of the Black Mouth, which is at Tate Modern. And then here are more images of another piece called All's Well That Ends. So this is the piece at Tate Modern. It's no longer there. It was a piece that was commissioned for about 3 years, and it was at the south side of Tate Modern, and it was a new public space for Tate Modern. I'm very interested in the idea of public space. I'm very interested in the idea of public and private space in particular. You can see it happening in cities all over the world. Spaces that are essentially private and yet public are allowed in, or the other way around. They're public, but you're not allowed to do certain things in them, and they have kind of rules to them as well. When Tate were building the new extension, they asked Ivan and I to look at a little tiny sliver of land that was at the back, and because it was kind of free, and it was not being used at the time. So we ended up conceiving of a work. We ended up taking really rather a large chunk of the footprint of Tate Modern, and Skirt of the Black Mouth was the piece that we made there. We managed to sort of take a bite of a sort of public space. And then this piece was then curated by the staff, and artists were asked to come and do works in the space as well. That's the back side of it there. Little folded thing that Ivan made in the studio. These are nice pieces of chalk. These are the chalk pieces that were placed in the space on a model for a work. That's the on this side here is the first model for the piece All's Well That Ends. And there's the final piece at the side there. All's Well That Ends is a work that came out of a situation that was happening in a town in Germany called Bochum. We were asked to go to the town because the major employer of the town, which is Vauxhall, but actually it's General Motors over here, was finally closing down its factory. And I'm sure, as you all know, when something like that happens in a town, it has a huge impact on the workers of the town, the family, and then the subsequent suppliers and so on. And what do they do in Germany when something like that happens? They commission artists to come in and make work about it, which is an amazing thing. So Ivan and I spent a lot of time in Bochum, and we ended up, we spent time with the workers of the Vauxhall factory to understand what had happened and why this had happened. The factory was actually incredibly efficiently run, and the workers they knew that there were closures coming up. And in fact, over the last 15 years, there had been several closures, and the amount of people working there had got less and less. And so the workers had got together at one point and decided that they were going to be the most efficient, they were going to work the hardest that they could, and they would show the Americans that they were able to run their factory properly so they wouldn't get closed down. And of course, they were closed down. They were closed down because the figures didn't work. I always find that quite... I find that idea of economies and the idea of it being such a kind of objective decision made about a place. I find that very interesting. And so we ended up what came out of all the conversations that we had is that actually the very essence of what everyone was feeling, or the thing that everyone wasn't talking about, was how incredibly humiliated they felt in this situation. They had done everything that they could. They had not taken holidays, they had worked as hard as they could, their cars were beautiful and perfect, and still they closed them down. And that's because that idea that everybody in that situation, they were on the wrong. They were all coming from different places. So this is the work that we made. It's called All's Well That Ends. The work is kind of about inner truth and public perception and personal change and enforced transformation and about humiliation. There are two actors that run this piece, and it's a working donut shop. One of the actors is from Germany, the other one is from the US, and the piece stands in the middle of the town, and you can go and buy a donut there, and they basically take you through every day, constantly, over and over again, the two sides of this relationship until one of them finally walks out. So the only constant is change. Now, I didn't make that up. I think that you can find that on tea towels and things like that. I think it's one of those sayings, but I think it's kind of true. It's very true. It's kind of unsettling, isn't it, when things are changing all the time, and it feels like, to me at the moment, feels like stuff's changing faster and faster all of the time. I mean, Brexit, this thing about Brexit was quite interesting in the sense, there are sort of seismic changes happening all the time. The other day I was on a long-haul flight, and I missed my flight to Seattle, and they put me on the next flight, and it was to Vancouver, which is sort of near Seattle, I suppose. And they did the same to an elderly gentleman next to me as well. And we ended up sitting next to each other on the flight the whole way, and we ended up talking all the time. And because he didn't want to watch films, he didn't really like it, and I had this great conversation with him. And he was in his mid-80s, he was about 84, 85, and he, we ended up talking quite about the kind of state of the world, and he was incredibly positive about the state of the world, which I found unusual. And he said, he'd just come out of retirement because he decided that he wanted to buy a young company from Argentina which made nanotechnology, and they were making this incredible technology that actually kind of deals with very, very toxic waste, and it just makes it disappear. I'm not quite sure how it worked, but he said it was these, and the way he talked about the fact that the guys that had invented the company and the way the nanotechnology worked, he just said, I have absolute faith in young people, and they are flexible enough to make sure that we're going to be okay. And I thought about this a lot. When people say, when you might someone falls, or they have a car accident, or you have a kind of a trauma happen to you, and they say, they were okay because if you stay quite flexible when that happens, if you're quite soft, you won't really hurt yourself as much. And so this idea of kind of like being able to sort of absorb things, take things, but then not exactly let them touch you, or at least not let them affect you emotionally, I think is something that I try to work into the work quite a lot. And it just sort of helps with the fact that there are many changes going on. I mean, obviously, as an artist, you're kind of, your job is to look around you and absorb what's going on, pull it inside, pull it into the studio, and then make stuff. And so if you're able to do that without kind of being so emotionally affected by things, maybe you can start to make the most extraordinary work, because there's certainly sort of extraordinary things happening around us. Oh, just before, this is a lovely bucket of ox blood. We sometimes use ox blood because it's a really beautiful material to use for preserving wood, and also for flooring as well. Ivan and I live in a really lovely medieval house, and they would have covered the mud floors with oxblood. This is a chalk and wax donut on ebonized wood, and that little model there, it's a little model that got made one day when I was out, and Ivan made it, and it's now making itself into something else here. We've written a few books, narratives, stories, and novellas about our work. Some of them are appearing here. And this is the piece on the far side is a piece called St. John's, and you can just see the redness of the wood there. That wood is covered with the oxblood. This work in particular, which is a pavilion, which is in a Dutch wood, and of course the wood, as you can see, is quite young, and the wood will then grow up in and around the work. It lights at night, and it kind of attracts a different kind of visitor at night than it does during the day. This is a piece called I Lost Her near Fantasy Island. Life has not been the same. This is a large white articulated lorry, and this installation here is actually in Bristol. It's set up at night, it's crashed during the night, and it has a full lorry full of flowers from the Rotterdam flower markets. And then it's not announced and just left in the city like that. So being an artist is a job. My job is an artist, and I go to a lot of meetings and groups, and and as you can imagine, a lot of the larger scale works take a long time to happen, and I sit with lots of different people, and I like, and I really hold that's ARTSIST. Oh yeah, sorry about that. And I really kind of like to. I really feel like that's my job and my responsibility, and I make the art. It does. The status, though, of an artist, I think, does change depending on who you're with and where you are. And I think when I work in different countries, for example, my status changes quite often. Sometimes and the expectations of what I do, and so that's can be slightly annoying sometimes, but that can also, I think really in the end is a huge bonus, because your job as an artist is to stay in that kind of fluid space. It's not to, you have a freedom, you're free, and I think that's the role that you need to be, even if it does mean that sometimes things get a little annoying and difficult, but sometimes they're not. There's a few works here that came from a show that we did at the Hepworth in Wakefield. On the far side, a vase of wax flowers. And then on this side here, I really love this little tiny piece here. It's actually a small, one of many small little sculptures that my son makes. He's 5, his name's Clay, and he made this one on the side here. And he made this, I was thinking about it, he made this when, at the beginning of the year, when I had to go and have a big operation in hospital, and I had to have a cyst taken out of me. And he made this little thing, yeah. And I looked at it and I thought, I wonder if that's what it looks like when they take it out, this thing that I've grown. I don't know what it was that I grew, a little button and a little bit of thread around it. There's a shot there on the far side of Tate Wilson, the actor that we work with quite a lot. And she's actually in a piece there that a gallery show that we had in Houston called Slick Changes. And it's a play for 2 actors. It's about 6 hours long. And it's about the downfall and subsequent rise of a person and how we invent narratives, basically to make life okay for ourselves. In front of her is a life-size puppet that she talks to quite a lot. This is her partner here. And this is Spiral Jetty. Her partner, Sancho, he always wears shoes with one of them slightly built up. And the two of them are constantly arguing about whether he really does have one leg longer than the other or not. A few years ago, we spent quite a lot of time in Seattle on a residency with the Draken Foundation. So they're a kite foundation. They have the most amazing collection of kites. They also have the most beautiful collection of images of Alexander Bell's kites as well. This is one of those images just here. Alexander Bell, you will probably know, invented the telephone, and then after inventing the telephone, kind of took off and lived in Newfoundland, I think, and he set up a kind of experimental studio in a village, just working on the first flight, and he used kites. When you would visit the show in Houston, there would be a kind of timetable on the wall as to quite where the actors would be at that point. At some points they were in the gallery, other points they were in a local donut shop. At some points they were just scuttling around outside Houston, on the road outside the gallery, and then right at the end they would take to a local cocktail bar and you could go and find them. So this is the show that I was just talking about, which is just on that side at the Hepworth in Wakefield. There's another smaller elliptical balloon there. And this is the interior here of Sleepers Awake. The balloon in that show would talk to the wall pieces. One wall piece is made from the soot of the chimneys of Wakefield, and the far wall piece is made from chalk. And they would speak to each other across the gallery. And a couple of times a day, one of our puppets would wander about too. I like this image on this far side of the two actors. It reminds me of that. I was trying to think of the book. I can't remember. It's one of Kurt Vonnegut's books. I think it might be Sirens of Titan, I'm not sure, where there's a character in it, and he hangs around a car lot continuously, pretending that he works there. And if the owner of the car lot sees him, he kind of ducks down so he's not seen, and then he kind of pops back up again. And he sort of says to himself, you know, car passing, sun out, clouds, as if he's got some control and as if he has some purpose. My friend Victoria Gould, who's an actor, told me about this incident that happened to her when she had some terrible news, and she was with another actor, an very elderly woman, and she started to cry, and the elderly woman came up to her and she put her sort of hand on her and she said, "Life is hard, go on, cry." And I kind of like that idea, that you have to sort of get on with things sometimes. So this is the work here that Ivan was talking about in Toronto, which is it's called the Cleaving. It's a work that we did recently, which was a work that was conceived around the idea of the Beaufort scale. Later, we then pulled those logs into a gallery in Toronto, and we had dinner on them. You can just see them there. We have this dinner service, which is a dinner service it's a crockery set that we're continuously adding to all the time, and as we travel and we pick things up and we make pieces out of it, so they all have kind of narratives and stories to them. Here you can see us making bowls here, which are from stones that we found in a river in Banff, and at the back there's a range of coconut cups, and they came from a coconut that washed up on the beach in Cambodia. This is our studio here, and this is a picture of the Cleaving work. We use bones quite a lot in our work. We grind them up to make pigments. We cast them to make candles, which is what's happening here. Let's see if you can just see that. Can you see? I'm just going to go back a little bit. This is a cast in the middle here of our dealer's ear, Clint. There we are. There's his ear being cast. One of our puppets. There's also I have a cast of my ear too, which you can just see on that side there. And currently I've got a cast of my ear, and it's sitting on the bedside table of my daughter. And she put it there so that she can listen to us all while I'm away. This is one of our dinners. So Ivan and I were discussing why we're so sorry, and we've both got completely different reasons for being sorry. Ivan's really sorry, I think, for being an artist. That's right, it's Ivan, yeah. And I'm sorry, but I'm really sorry. I forgot what I was really sorry. Oh, maybe I'm not so sorry anymore, but I like that idea of being sorry, that I'm sort of sorry for being here, and also I'm sorry, but we just have to there just has to be art. And I know that you might want something else, or other things might seem important, but I'm really sorry, but I'm going to make some art, and I'm going to stick around and make it. This piece here is called Sorry, I'm So Sorry, Goodbye, actually. It's a lovely little model. This is a model for a work that we'll see a little bit in a second. Just a little cardboard model there. And a cast stool. So as well as balloons, we really like to make kites and flying sculptural works as well. This kite here, which is called the opposite of all those things, is a really heavy black kite, and it's based around a meteorite. This is I like this text. When you hold the fork, think of your father. So here's another sketch of that first model, which is a piece that we put together in Vancouver for the Vancouver Art Gallery. It's called Plaza. And this piece here, which is inside one of our books, is called Black Cloud, and that's the piece that Emma mentioned, actually. And there's Ivan with Will You Please Be Quiet, Please, at the Royal Academy. And here's a really model for that piece of work that's hanging there. Sometimes with some of the kite works that we make, the sculpture works, not this one, but some of them, when they get shown in exhibition spaces, they're hung, and then if the conditions are right outside, they get picked up very gently and taken out and then flown in the sky outside the gallery. It's quite exciting, especially if you crash it. So this is the piece that Emma was mentioned, called Black Cloud, this work here. And that piece was subsequently reinstalled at the Hepworth in Wakefield, and now it's at Eastside Projects. It lives, I think it's nearly 10 years old, actually. And those kites, this is the two of the kites hanging in Royal Academy. So I'm nearly done. Of course, it's really that I want to make really, really beautiful, extraordinary, exquisite work, I suppose, and try and express how I feel about the world in beautiful work. So this piece here is called Little Shining Man. And next to it is a really lovely little tiny cardboard model that's sitting in the studio at the moment and has been photographed quite a few times. 'Cause sometimes what I'll do is pick that up and take it with me when I'm going to have meetings, and I'll put it in my bag, and then at some point during the meeting, when the meeting's been going on for hours and hours and we're talking about planning permissions and health and safety and things like that, and we get the little model out and then we pass it around and think about that instead. There's a piece here, the photograph here, this is a beautiful stave church in Norway, but the photograph here is the start of a project that's called Shadow Curriculum. And it's a very long-term project that I've just finished doing with the South London Gallery, where we were presented with a problem, a tension that was happening. There was this really lovely school next to the South London Gallery who were being made to move to another school. And the school was not happy about this, and they didn't want to move, but they were having a new school built for them, which ultimately would be better, but they felt very, very fond of their old school. The school's also a special needs school for children aged 11 to 19 as well, and they really weren't happy about any change whatsoever, so we conceived of a project with them. And the project involved us taking the school down to a woodland. This is where they all are here, and they sat and watched their tree being felled. And then their tree was taken up to their school, and it sat in their playground, and we carved the tree together. You can see us there working on it. This tree's about 120 foot tall, and we are working on it there. And then the tree was, let me see, through. And then the tree was dragged with horses through Peckham in 3 pieces. And we had a parade as we moved it through. And then we re-erected the tree, put it back together again and pulled it up. And it was placed in their new school. And this process happened alongside, it happened over several years as the school was adjusting to moving to their new school. We sort of had this distraction and this focus for everybody instead. More images from the studio. There's the tree being put back. That's Ivan in the cage there, not me. Those are the horses. That's Alexander Bell on that side. We only got to fly Little Shining Man just for this one weekend because the commission was it was a private commission, and so then the piece now hangs in his marina, and he has a really lovely film of it flying, but it doesn't get to fly anymore. And we were flying it there on the beach in Jersey, Jersey is a tiny little island just off the French coast, but it's a UK island, and we were waiting all of that weekend to get the right conditions, because you need at least a 20-mile-an-hour wind to get the piece to fly up into the sky, and we were very nervous that it wouldn't happen. And as we were trying continuously over and over again, people were coming from all over the island to kind of see this piece being flown. We had an enormous crowd, and in the end, it finally flew into the sky. And of course, we were terribly nervous that it might crash and we might break it as well, which didn't happen. I think I'm going to stop there. Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you, Ivan. Thank you, Heather. We have time for just a couple of questions, if there are any. Well, I will start with a question. I think, and what we've talked about and what we sort of heard, you can come, we can share a mic, from this evening is that obviously storytelling is a very sort of important part of the process, and then also how sort of the memory of that exists in the work. And I guess, is it very important for you to begin with that story before you could begin the journey to realize the project? Or is it more that the story sort of unfolds itself as you've sort of begun?
I'll do this one. What we try and do, and I've said it a few times today, is that we always trying to make work the super hard way. We make life very difficult for ourselves and find the longest path possible to the work. Which really just involves the idea being that opens us up to as many things along the way as possible. If that's exploration of materials, or bringing people into the work, or just thinking about who that workforce might be, who can make the work with us, how we can turn that into something of interest, who can share in that. So in some of those works, the piece of work is almost just the end product of another project, of another piece of work in a sense. Or most of those works, the thing you see is only 50% of what we'd consider to be the work itself. So it's a sort of engagement, but an engagement in, towards something everyone can share, and that's remarkable. That's also catalytic for something that it can move on and do something else. We're very conscious and cautious about the idea of public art being brought to a place, being a good thing, and then disappearing again. And how does that leave a place? So we try to use the work, we try to conceive the work as at least, we try to conceive the work at least as the beginnings of some long-term necessary change to do that. And if we can use the mechanism of having to make the work to set up those structures as well, that are there then in place when the work goes for wherever it is that we're hoping to happen in that place. Well, that's all good as well. So all those stories come from all of that. So no, we don't know them. We make them, I think. Yeah.
Oh, there's one. I'll just pass the mic down.
Thank you. I just have a question about the collaborative process in which you're engaging with a community, with a group of people, with the public in some way, and how that collaboration with a group starts to impact or influence the artistic sort of, not preconceptions, but kind of what you bring to it as a duo to a particular place and project. How does that interaction with a particular group of people impact that process, and how does one keep control of it? Do you find that the input that you receive, there's a process of acceptance and rejection? And I'm just curious how that works when you kind of broaden a group of people in which you're making the work to some extent together.
Shall I answer this one? Okay. So we have a process where, and I can think of like 2 projects that I'm working on at the moment, which I wouldn't have talked about today, where I have a process of when I go to a place that I do spend a lot of time visiting and talking to people about nothing really in particular. I just go to find out about them, about what they do. I try to understand what the state of things are in a place. Very often I'm talking to people which may not know each other, but they all live in a particular place. So I get a kind of feeling for a place, and and then I'll go back and then I'll write a narrative. I write a kind of story of what I found and what I discovered, and then what I was thinking while I was talking to people as well. So I'd start to write a story. I'm always looking for something that people, they're either not talking about it, or there's a sort of blind spot that's there. And I try to think about what that might be and how a project might insert itself into that place. And the reason for doing that is because I think that I have to come up with an incredibly strong idea that is also that's quite multifaceted in relation to what it might mean to different kinds of people. I'm thinking of Small Bells Rings, for example. But then it becomes a project that seems like it's something either that is makes sense to some people, is exciting to other people, might, and also a project where I can work with people in their capacity as experts. So I'm not just asking them to be part of my project, I'm asking them for their help because I genuinely need their advice on what it is that I'm making, so that we have a group of local experts that are part of it. When you work in the public realm, you've really got to get something that the idea of what you're working on has to be incredibly robust and really strong, and yet can pull in around the outside a people and a place and materials and form and so on. So it starts to make sense, even though it might not be something that anyone wants or asks for in the beginning, but it becomes something that becomes powerful enough that people feel that it's going to be okay. I'm not quite sure why sometimes they might need it, because that's what art is, but it speaks to them at some point or some level. And I do that often by quite a long process of talking and looking and talking and going back again. And I try something out, I try an idea out, and then I might pull it back again.
There's one. Okay. Yeah. Veronica, do you want to go? Okay.
You talk about you going to see a project in the beginning. So where is the collaboration? Do you both go and you both discuss the ideas involved in the project? Or I'm interested in the way you talk about you in the singular, yes, and you're a duo. So I'm interested in how the collaboration works, and does it work at different points, and how the dialogue comes together at various points.
Yes. Yes, we do different things, actually, quite often. But it can depend on how a collaboration or a project or a commission comes to us, because sometimes it can come, if it comes to us because of a connection that Ivan's made, then perhaps it might be something that feels better for Ivan to take forward and then me to come in at a separate point. Or if it comes from something that I've been working on. And then what I find is really works in our collaboration is I'll go away and I get completely absorbed by a place and a people, and I get a very emotional response to a place as well. And then I come back to the studio and I talk through what I've been working on, what I'm thinking about with Ivan, and in the context of the studio, in the sense to kind of bring back all that information, then place it in the practice away from being affected, in order to bring in something new to it, because then I think I have to bring something new to a place. I'm bringing my work there, so it can work. That usually works really well, and at certain points, then Ivan will be involved in the project too. It's quite each project's quite different, actually, and it kind of depends on the sort of first contact and the motivation behind the project as well. I mean, sometimes you can imagine, sometimes when we work on things, a project might take 3 years, so that there are different points when you might get us for different things. And yet, and I think it at least encourages there being a sort of objective voice that helps with certain elements of the project, because sometimes it gets really tricky with certain works as well.
There's one question over.
Hi guys, thank you so far. This has been fantastic. I think that the commission All's Well That Ends is really instructive because you inherit a situation where there's an undoubtedly negative event that happens in a place, and Heather, you kind of talk about going in there and trying to understand the ethos, what people are feeling, what they're doing, how it's going to impact them going forward. And I wonder how you balance an artist's responsibility to tell it like it is versus instilling hope or maybe putting in your own opinions of what you think of a situation. So just kind of talk about the interplay of telling the story and kind of being truthful to what's actually happening versus trying to promote either a positive message or putting in your own opinion of a situation, please.
I guess we're not really about sugarcoating anything necessarily, and All's Well That Ends was really about telling it like it was, making people sort of see the situation they'd been put into, I think, in a sort of a very darkly sort of humorous way.
For that particular commission, I think there were 4 different artists, but so there was a playwright, a play written, and there was also I think there was there were several works that happened, and they I felt like what we had to do was we had to reflect back. This is what's happening here, and actually what the project did is it reflected something back that actually people weren't saying. So it was they were talking very much in terms of what was the physical kind of effects that would happen in the city. They might even talk at some small level about feeling sadness, but actually what came across after talking to everyone is just how deeply humiliated they felt. But that's not something that we want to they wanted to articulate, and so the art was able to, and of course this is what art's able to do, I hope, good art is able to do, is to speak of the things that we can't talk about, and that's just the way that literature does and music does as well. It was, and I hope that the work gave you an intense feeling of what they had done, what had happened to them. It was. There was, in the city, they had kind of made a plan and they were moving on. And of course, people really want to do that. And we have an intense, we feel, particularly in the West, that all right, we'll deal with that. Here's our plan, this is where we're going. Whereas I wanted to just say, this is it. This is what it is like right now. This is how it feels inside.
We can take probably just one more quick question, but I'm sure you're all eager to go and watch the debate. So, anyone? One more question? No? Okay. Well, thank you, Heather. Thank you, Ivan. This has been fantastic.